Have you ever wondered why some of the smartest people you know struggle to make ends meet, while others, far less intelligent, seem to effortlessly glide through life, cushioned by wealth? The harsh reality is that our world doesn't prioritize intelligence, talent, or merit nearly as much as it prioritizes money. Think about education. Intelligence should open doors, right? But from the earliest stages, it's wealth, not ability, that determines your starting line. The child born into privilege doesn't just receive better resources or more qualified teachers. They inherit connections, opportunities, and an early boost in a race that many never even get to enter. Intelligence, meanwhile, is often trapped, struggling just to be recognized. Schools in affluent neighborhoods receive more funding, attract better teachers, and offer extensive extracurricular programs. Wealth buys private tutoring, specialized test preparation, and prestigious internships. Meanwhile, bright students from poorer backgrounds are left fighting for the bare essentials. Intelligence, raw potential, brilliance, these are all secondary if there isn't money backing them up. The workplace isn't much different. We love to believe that brains and hard work automatically equal success. Yet, look around. Promotions, raises, even opportunities to lead, often these go to those who navigate office politics or who come from backgrounds where networking and influence were as natural as breathing. Intelligence alone rarely cuts through this noise. Consider the reality of internships and entry-level jobs. Who can afford to spend months working unpaid, gaining crucial experience? Certainly not the talented individual who needs to pay bills, support family, or simply survive. Instead, these opportunities frequently go to those who have financial safety nets, whose intelligence or ability may be mediocre, but whose bank accounts speak volumes. And then there's innovation. Our culture romanticizes the genius inventor, the lone visionary whose brilliant mind changes the world. But what's the unspoken truth behind every great innovation? Money? Without funding? Without investors willing to take risks, even the most brilliant ideas suffocate in silence. Genius needs capital to speak, to act, to matter. Think of all the brilliant ideas you've never heard about because they lacked initial funding. Innovations in medicine, technology, sustainability, all potentially transformative, yet overlooked because investors saw quicker profits elsewhere. Meanwhile, less revolutionary ideas, backed by substantial capital, thrive simply due to financial backing, dominating markets, not because they're better, but because they're wealthier. In society itself, wealth doesn't just open doors, it writes the rules. Laws, policies, entire systems bend around money. Intelligence can identify injustice, highlight flaws, scream for change, but without financial leverage, it's just a voice lost in the wind. Money shapes society's future far more decisively than ideas ever could. Consider politics, the arena where decisions affecting millions are made. Who truly holds power? It's rarely the most intelligent or the most ethical. It's the richest. Campaigns run on money. Policies are influenced by lobbyists with deep pockets. The intelligent citizen, without financial backing, watches from the sidelines, their brilliance overshadowed by the brute force of wealth. Media, too, is dominated by financial power. Ideas gain traction, not because they're inherently valuable, but because someone with enough money decides they're worth attention. Intelligent, thoughtful commentary can easily be drowned out by louder, wealthier voices capable of buying airtime, manipulating public perception, and shaping narratives. Why is this disturbing? Because it reveals a truth we've long tried to ignore. Our world is not built to reward merit or intellect, but wealth. Intelligence isn't irrelevant. It's simply secondary. Money doesn't just talk. It shouts louder, commands attention, and silences opposition. Recognizing this doesn't mean accepting defeat, but it means understanding the real rules of the game. Intelligence matters, but without money, its influence is painfully limited. If you've ever wondered why the world seems unfair, unequal, tilted heavily toward the wealthy, it's because it is. Yet, despite knowing this, we cling to myths that intelligence alone can break through barriers. We teach children to believe that good grades and smart ideas guarantee success. We perpetuate this narrative because acknowledging the overwhelming power of money is uncomfortable. It confronts us with an unsettling truth: meritocracy, the comforting idea that talent and hard work are the keys to success, is largely an illusion. But this isn't simply a bleak indictment, it's a necessary awareness. The more clearly we see the game, the better equipped we are to navigate it, challenge it, and maybe even change it. Wealth may dominate, but awareness is power. Recognizing how deeply money shapes our lives, our opportunities, and our society is the first step toward demanding a world where intelligence and merit genuinely matter. The world doesn't celebrate genius. It celebrates what it always has: power, influence, and above all, money. Have you ever noticed how often genuinely good people find themselves caught up in situations they never intended to be in, silenced, manipulated, or subtly controlled? It's unsettling to acknowledge. But the disturbing truth is that the kindness, empathy, and moral compass of good people often become their greatest vulnerabilities. Think about the qualities we associate with being good: compassion, empathy, generosity, a strong sense of duty. These virtues make societies thrive, communities flourish, and relationships meaningful. But they also create openings for manipulation. Why? Because manipulators thrive on trust. They exploit our best instincts, knowing precisely how to twist kindness into compliance. Take guilt, for example, one of the simplest yet most powerful tools of control. Good people naturally feel responsible for the well-being of others. When told their actions or lack thereof hurt someone, they reflexively internalize blame. Manipulators recognize this. They weaponize guilt, carefully turning acts of kindness into obligations and generosity into debt. Consider the subtle power dynamics in friendships, relationships, or even workplaces. Someone consistently goes above and beyond, not because they're weak, but precisely because they are good. They take on extra tasks, stay late, or sacrifice their own needs. Slowly, without realizing, their kindness shifts into expectation. Once generosity is normalized, it stops being appreciated and starts being demanded. Soon a good person finds themselves trapped by their own decency, guilted into maintaining behaviors that slowly erode their autonomy. Another vulnerability: empathy. Good people instinctively imagine themselves in the position of others, feeling their pain, understanding their struggles. This trait, essential for building trust and meaningful connections, also becomes a double-edged sword. Empathy makes it difficult to set boundaries because setting boundaries can feel harsh, even cruel. Manipulators exploit empathy by constantly presenting themselves as victims, needing rescue, assistance, or special consideration. Think about the parent who uses their child's empathy against them, the partner who constantly needs emotional reassurance, or the friend who relies excessively on emotional labor without reciprocation. Empathy, intended to build connections, becomes a leash, subtly controlling good people through the fear of being labeled selfish or unkind. Then there's the need for approval and the fear of conflict. Good people often prioritize harmony. Conflict feels uncomfortable, hostile even, so they learn to avoid confrontation. Manipulators exploit this avoidance. They create environments where any disagreement is labeled disruptive or toxic. Slowly, good people become silent, compliant, sacrificing their true thoughts and feelings for the illusion of peace. And it doesn't stop at personal relationships. Societal systems themselves rely on the compliance of good people. Governments, institutions, and corporations frequently appeal to civic duty, collective responsibility, and moral obligation to maintain control. Good citizens comply because they genuinely care about community, justice, and stability. But their goodness makes them less likely to question motives, challenge narratives, or demand transparency. They are obedient, not through coercion, but conviction. Even the language of morality is weaponized. Good people don't complain. Good citizens don't disrupt. Good employees don't question. Such narratives subtly condition people to associate virtue with silence and obedience. To question authority or demand fairness becomes equated with selfishness, rebellion, or troublemaking. So why is recognizing this disturbing? Because it shatters the comforting illusion that goodness always leads to happiness or fairness. It reveals that society's moral structure, far from protecting good people, often leaves them vulnerable to manipulation. It challenges the reassuring notion that kindness, empathy, and generosity are always rewarded. In reality, they're frequently exploited. Yet, understanding this doesn't mean abandoning goodness or virtue. Instead, it calls for an essential shift. Good people must learn to recognize manipulation, set firm boundaries, and understand that true kindness sometimes means protecting themselves. Goodness doesn't have to equate to vulnerability. Awareness and strength must accompany compassion. Being good is admirable, essential even, but being good and aware is powerful. It's not enough to merely be virtuous. Good people must also be vigilant, ready to identify when their virtues are being twisted into tools of control. Only then can kindness remain what it was always meant to be, a strength, not a weakness. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you're always tired, not just physically tired after a long day, but mentally and emotionally exhausted, in a way sleep never fully cures? This isn't an accident. It's not your fault, nor is it a sign of personal weakness. It's something deeper, intentional, and more insidious. The system itself thrives on your exhaustion. Look around. From the moment you wake, you're bombarded by a never-ending stream of demands, distractions, and obligations. Notifications scream for attention. Work tasks pile up endlessly, bills demand payment, and social pressures never let you pause. The world moves fast, deliberately too fast. Because when you're tired, truly worn down, you're less likely to question, less likely to resist, and more likely to accept whatever reality you're handed. Exhaustion isn't just an inconvenience, it's a powerful tool of control. When you're constantly overwhelmed, your ability to critically think or challenge authority diminishes. It's not that you're incapable, it's simply that you lack the energy to engage. Fatigue makes it difficult to think clearly, easier to accept simple answers, comforting lies, and shallow distractions. It turns you from an active participant into a passive observer, quietly accepting rather than actively shaping your life. Consider your typical workday. Most modern workplaces emphasize productivity above all else. You're rewarded not for efficiency, but for endurance, the ability to handle more work, more pressure, more stress. The mythical hustle culture glorifies exhaustion as a badge of honor. You're subtly trained to associate being overwhelmed with importance, dedication, and success. But ask yourself, who truly benefits from this relentless pursuit? Certainly not you. Productivity has soared over the last decades, yet wages stagnate, benefits dwindle, and job security vanishes. The system extracts value from your exhaustion, channeling your effort upwards while leaving you depleted. And the cruelest part, you're told to be grateful for the privilege of working yourself into the ground. Beyond work, exhaustion is everywhere. The endless scroll of social media isn't designed for your relaxation or genuine connection. It's optimized to keep you emotionally drained, yet compulsively returning for more. Algorithms carefully calibrate your attention, knowing exactly when to deliver dopamine hits, outrage, and anxiety, keeping you in a perpetual state of reactive exhaustion. Then there's consumer culture, built on your fatigue. Exhaustion weakens your self-control and amplifies your desire for quick comforts. After a draining day, resisting impulse buys, unhealthy food, or unnecessary products becomes difficult. Corporations know this. Your exhaustion fuels profits, quietly encouraging you to buy comfort, convenience, and distraction, further embedding you into the cycle of work, spend, consume, repeat. Politically, exhaustion serves another critical purpose. It suppresses dissent. An exhausted population doesn't protest injustice, demand accountability, or challenge systemic corruption. It's too tired to mobilize, too overwhelmed to organize. Political and economic powers benefit from your exhaustion precisely because it keeps you compliant, quiet, and manageable. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all is how exhaustion isolates you. Relationships suffer when everyone is perpetually tired. Communities weaken as individuals retreat inward, too drained to participate. Isolation makes control easier. If you're disconnected, you're less likely to see the shared struggle, less likely to recognize systemic exploitation, less likely to unite against it. This system of exhaustion thrives because it's invisible, disguised as normal life. You're taught exhaustion is natural, unavoidable, even virtuous. But recognizing this manipulation is the first step towards reclaiming your power. Realize your exhaustion isn't a personal failing. It's a deliberate, calculated outcome of a system designed to exploit it. Breaking free isn't easy. It requires conscious resistance. It means redefining your value beyond productivity. It means resting without guilt, saying no without apology, and rejecting the toxic glamorization of exhaustion. Most importantly, it means understanding that your well-being is revolutionary. The system needs you exhausted, yes, but what it fears most is your awakening. Imagine what would happen if collectively we refused to participate in our own exploitation. Imagine the strength, clarity, and resilience of people no longer exhausted but empowered. The system thrives on your exhaustion. Don't give it the satisfaction. Imagine you're sitting on a plush, comfortable couch. Your favorite show is streaming. A delicious meal sits within arm's reach, and your worries feel distant, muffled by the gentle hum of contentment. Now ask yourself, why would you ever leave? Why question anything at all when comfort feels so good? Comfort isn't just pleasant, it's intoxicating. It soothes anxieties, numbs fears, and gently persuades you to accept things exactly as they are. But here's the unsettling truth. Comfort isn't just relaxation, it's a method of control. It's a velvet-lined trap, silently shaping your thoughts, limiting your actions, and subtly ensuring you stay exactly where the system wants you. Think about the ways society carefully designs comfort to keep you compliant. Your environment is crafted to minimize friction, maximize ease, and condition you to desire convenience above all else. Delivery services, streaming platforms, and smart devices promise effortless living. They seem harmless, even beneficial, but their true function is deeper. The more comfortable you become, the less likely you are to disrupt your own ease by asking uncomfortable questions or pursuing difficult truths. In a world obsessed with comfort, discomfort becomes suspicious. Challenges, risks, and uncertainties start to feel unnatural, even threatening. You're trained to fear disruption, to avoid inconvenience at all costs. Why protest injustice or seek personal growth when staying comfortable is so much simpler? And that's precisely the point. Comfort creates inertia. It keeps you passive, docile, and indifferent. You're less likely to question authority when your basic needs are met and exceeded. Governments, corporations, even social systems understand this implicitly. They provide just enough comfort to keep dissent at bay, ensuring you're satisfied enough not to complain, but never empowered enough to demand more. Consider modern entertainment: endless content, instantly available, meticulously tailored to your preferences. It's comfort so finely tuned that it creates dependency. Hours vanish, scrolling through social media or binge-watching shows, pleasant diversions designed not just to entertain, but to distract. The real world, with its complicated issues and uncomfortable truths, fades away, replaced by an artificial paradise built from pixels and dopamine hits. Your reliance on comfort extends into your professional life as well. The illusion of stability, regular paychecks, predictable routines, and minor workplace perks becomes enough to keep you locked in place. Employers know comfort discourages rebellion. Why risk losing stability to demand better wages, fairer treatment, or more meaningful work when comfort whispers, "This is good enough"? Politically, comfort is even more effective. Comfortable citizens don't question systems or challenge power structures. As long as basic comforts, housing, entertainment, minor luxuries are accessible, public outrage is muted and genuine change stalls. Why fight corruption or inequality if your own personal comfort remains untouched? But comfort doesn't just pacify, it isolates. It turns inward, fostering individual satisfaction over collective progress. Community action feels unnecessary when your personal needs are consistently met. This isolation weakens social bonds, making collective resistance impossible. Comfort becomes your cage, soft, appealing, but still a cage. The insidious nature of comfort is precisely why it's the best form of control. Unlike fear, which provokes immediate resistance, comfort is willingly embraced. You don't fight against it, you seek it out, invest in it, defend it. The chains of comfort feel good, even desirable. Breaking free from them seems irrational. Yet, real growth, both personal and societal, requires discomfort. Change demands disruption, struggle, and risk. Comfort may shield you temporarily, but it also restricts your potential, numbing you to your own power and possibilities. Recognizing this isn't easy. It requires looking critically at your own desires, questioning what you've been conditioned to crave. It demands confronting the fact that true comfort, meaningful comfort, isn't about effortless ease. It's about freedom, autonomy, and authentic self-determination. Comfort, in its truest form, should empower you, not entrap you. Ask yourself, is your comfort making you stronger, wiser, freer, or is it quietly controlling you? ensuring your compliance and limiting your potential. Breaking the spell of comfort doesn't mean embracing endless suffering. It means reclaiming comfort on your terms, comfort that uplifts, strengthens, and genuinely fulfills. Realize that your craving for ease is natural, but allowing it to control you is not. Don't confuse comfort with freedom. They are not the same. One offers temporary relief, the other genuine liberation. Understand the difference, reclaim your autonomy, and redefine comfort in a way that frees you rather than confines you. Forget what you were told in school. Forget the courtroom dramas. Forget the slogans etched into courthouses, justice for all, equal under the law. Because those words, they're branding, not reality. If justice were truly a principle, it would apply to everyone everywhere without exception. But it doesn't. It never has. Justice in the real world is a commodity, rationed, conditional, and often only available to those who can afford it. Now ask yourself, who gets justice quickly? Who gets heard, believed, vindicated? And who gets ignored, dismissed, or crushed under the weight of bureaucracy and delay? The answers aren't random. They follow a pattern written in class, wealth, power, and influence. We say justice is blind, but in practice it sees everything. It sees your race, your income, your connections. It weighs your status before it weighs your evidence. The wealthy don't face the system. They own it. They hire better lawyers, manipulate narratives, delay proceedings, or make problems disappear entirely. Their justice isn't served, it's sculpted. Meanwhile, for the average person, justice is a slow, expensive, and punishing process. It's waiting months for a court date, years for resolution, and sometimes a lifetime for fairness that never comes. It's being told you have rights, then watching those rights vanish the moment you can't pay for the right representation. The truth? You don't get the justice you deserve. You get the justice you can afford. This isn't just about high-profile court cases or headline scandals. It's about the daily erosion of fairness across the system. It's the tenant evicted with no warning, while the landlord walks free from responsibility. It's the worker exploited under wage theft laws that are never enforced. It's the protester jailed for speaking out, while those in power silence dissent with impunity. The system is built to appear fair while functioning as a gatekeeper. It teaches you to trust the process while ensuring the outcome is predetermined. For the privileged, justice is preventative. It protects. For everyone else, it's punitive. It punishes. That's the quiet trick. Same word, different outcomes. Worse still, justice is performative. Governments and institutions love showcasing it when it's convenient, when it suits public relations, when it distracts from deeper rot. A symbolic arrest here, a public trial there. But behind the curtain, the rules bend for those who write them. Justice becomes a spectacle, a way to sell stability, not deliver it. And if you dare to demand fairness, to challenge the imbalance, you're told to be patient, civil, respectful of the system that ignores you. You're warned not to get angry, not to disrupt, not to protest too loudly. Because when justice becomes a privilege, those without it are expected to stay quiet about the injustice. So what's the cost of pretending justice is a principle? It teaches people to wait for help that's never coming. It convinces them that the system will fix itself. It makes them blame themselves when the system fails them. It pacifies the oppressed while empowering the comfortable. But here's the hard truth. Until justice becomes unconditional, until it's removed from the grip of power and money, it will never be a principle. It will always be a transaction. And that means the fight for justice isn't about making the system work better. It's about forcing it to work for everyone, whether it wants to or not. Justice should not be a luxury item. It should not be reserved for the connected, the wealthy, or the well-spoken. It should be automatic, uncompromising, universal. Until then, stop saying justice is guaranteed. Say what it really is, a privilege distributed by design, not a principle upheld by default. Only then can we begin to fix it. You want to understand how a system really works? Don't start with the laws, don't start with the speeches or the mission statements. Start with the cash flow. Who's getting paid? How are they getting paid? And what behavior makes them the most money? Because when you follow the money, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Punishment pays. Prevention doesn't. Think about prisons, not as moral institutions, not as centers for rehabilitation, but as businesses, because that's what they are. Private prisons, prison contractors, surveillance companies, phone service vendors, they all turn a profit off incarceration. Every new inmate is a new revenue stream. Every extended sentence means another month of billing. The longer people stay trapped, the better the margins. Now ask yourself, where's the money in prevention? Where's the incentive to stop crime before it happens? To invest in mental health care, addiction support, education, community programs? There isn't one. Not really, because prevention costs money up front. And worse, it reduces future profit by reducing future crime. If people get healthy, supported, stable, they stop feeding the punishment machine. It's not just prisons, fines, fees, citations. They're all revenue tools. Cities depend on them. Police departments get budget increases, not from solving problems, but from issuing more tickets, making more arrests, generating more income. It's why low-level offenses are over-policed. It's why broken windows theory became policy, because punishing the poor is a business model. Prevention doesn't pay. Policing poverty does. And once you're in the system, every step is monetized. Court fees, probation charges, drug tests, classes, an endless stream of requirements, each with a price tag. Miss one payment, more punishment, more profit. The cycle continues. Now zoom out. What if healthcare worked this way? What if doctors made the most money by letting you get sick instead of keeping you well? Oh wait, they often do. Chronic illness, not prevention, drives pharmaceutical sales. Emergency care, not primary care, brings in the big dollars. Again, punishment for neglect is profitable, preventing the need in the first place. Not so much. The truth is simple, but devastating. Our systems are reactive by design. They don't aim to reduce suffering. They aim to manage it for profit. Prevention removes future customers. Punishment creates repeat business. That's why schools are defunded while jails expand. That's why crisis hotlines close while surveillance budgets rise. That's why society treats symptoms but ignores root causes. There's no economic incentive to build a world where fewer people need help, fewer people fall, fewer people break. Because if fewer people fall apart, there's less to punish. And if there's less to punish, there's less to monetize. So what does that mean for you? It means when something goes wrong in your life, when you struggle, when you break down, when you reach out, you're entering a system that doesn't want to stop the pain. It wants to manage your pain just enough to profit from it. You're not a person in need, you're a potential revenue stream. It also means real solutions won't come from the top down, because the top is getting paid to keep things broken. Prevention requires long-term thinking, care, investment, and a willingness to lose short-term profit. And those in power, They're not in the business of losing profit. If you want prevention to matter, you have to make it matter. You have to see where the money flows, where it stagnates, and who benefits from the pain continuing. You have to understand that systems don't operate on morality. They operate on margins. Punishment is more profitable than prevention. And that's why you keep seeing the same problems, year after year, generation after generation, because someone, somewhere, is cashing in on your suffering. That cycle doesn't break until we stop rewarding pain and start investing in prevention. Not because it's profitable, but because it's right. Imagine walking into a grand hall, not a courtroom, not a parliament, something older, richer, hidden, a place where decisions are made before the public ever hears about them, where power is not debated, it's enforced. And here's the unsettling truth. You don't get to vote on anything that really matters. You were told power is democratic, that the people rule, that votes shape history. But think about it. How often does your vote actually change the outcome? How often are you offered a real choice? Not two sides of the same coin, but actual divergence. Rarely, because real power doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't campaign. It doesn't need your approval. Real power is inherited, bought, maneuvered into place like chess pieces, decades in advance. It operates in boardrooms, think tanks, private dinners behind closed doors. It trades in secrets, not slogans, influence, not ideology. You don't elect billionaires. You don't elect hedge funds. You don't elect the corporations that write legislation before politicians even see it. You vote for the face of power, not its spine. It's designed that way. Because illusion is safer than confrontation. If you believe your voice matters equally, if you believe the system is fair, you won't rebel. You'll play along, casting ballots, debating policies, arguing online, all while the real decisions are made far above your reach. This isn't just conspiracy, it's structure, it's design. Consider how laws are passed. Lobbyists write the language. Politicians, many of whom rely on those very lobbyists for campaign funds, rubber stamp it. Regulatory agencies are filled with former industry executives. Then they return to those industries once their public service is done. It's a revolving door, and you are never invited inside. Look at wealth. The people with the most influence are those with the most capital. They don't need elections. They own the platforms that shape what you see. They fund the candidates. They bankroll the media narratives. And if an outsider threatens that order, they don't need to be voted out. They'll be crushed, co-opted, or quietly erased. Ask yourself this: if power truly belonged to the people, would income inequality be this obscene? Would billion-dollar corporations evade taxes while entire cities crumble? Would healthcare be a luxury? Would truth be auctioned off to the highest bidder? Real power doesn't defend itself in public debates. It doesn't need to. It's protected by layers: media, money, myth. You're given just enough agency to feel involved, never enough to truly disrupt. Even protest becomes part of the illusion. You're allowed to march, to shout, to sign petitions, as long as the wheels keep turning, as long as the machine stays intact. Real power tolerates protest, but try withholding your labor. Try cutting off its profits. Then you'll see the mask fall. And what about justice? Do you think it's blind? Or does it peek out from under the blindfold to check your bank account, your connections, your influence? You can't vote away corruption. That's legal. You can't vote out billionaires who were never on a ballot. You can't reform a system whose foundation was built to serve itself. So what can you do? You recognize it. You stop pretending. You stop swallowing the lie that representation is the same as control, that participation equals power. You start seeing who really holds the strings and how they keep pulling them. And then, only then, you begin to shift the question. Not who should we vote for, but why do we let them rule at all? Because once you accept that real power is never voted for, you're no longer just a pawn in the game. You become a threat to the board. And that's where change begins, not with ballots, but with awakening. Imagine two startup founders. One becomes a billionaire, their face splashed across magazines, invited to give TED Talks, praised as a genius. The other disappears into obscurity. Same intelligence, same effort, same idea, even the difference: luck. And that's what makes this so disturbing, because we've built an entire mythology around success. We believe success is a reflection of merit, that if someone is rich, famous, or powerful, they must have earned it. They must be smarter, harder working, more visionary than the rest. But that's not the full story. It never was. What you're really seeing, more often than not, is survival bias. Survival bias is the illusion that success stories are the only ones that matter, because they're the only ones you hear. You look at the winners, the survivors, the exceptions, and you forget the thousands who followed the same path and failed. Not because they lacked talent, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because the world is chaos dressed in a business suit. We love stories of college dropouts becoming tech giants, but we never read about the thousands of dropouts who now live paycheck to paycheck. We idolize the athlete who made it out of poverty, but forget the countless others who trained just as hard and never got noticed. The media doesn't cover failure. Failure doesn't sell, but it's everywhere, quietly screaming beneath the noise of celebration. And if you're not careful, you start to internalize this lie that success is destiny and failure is a moral flaw, that the winners deserve everything they get and the rest just weren't good enough. It's a seductive story. It makes the world feel fair, predictable. But it's not. Success is a lottery, a brutal, silent game of probabilities, privilege, timing, and access. Hard work plays a role, but luck plays a louder one. This is what survival bias hides. The truth that most success stories are statistical outliers, the exception, not the rule. When we study the successful, we only analyze the visible tip of the iceberg. We forget the sunken mass beneath the surface, the failures, the broken, the overlooked. It's not just misleading, it's dangerous. Because when you believe success is always earned, you become cruel. You begin to despise the struggling. You blame them. You call them lazy, undisciplined, unworthy. And worst of all, you apply that same venom inward. Every missed opportunity becomes your fault. Every failure, a personal indictment. Survival bias doesn't just distort how we view others, it poisons how we see ourselves. And then there's the institutions, the systems. They thrive on survival bias. They promote a few stories of triumph to justify the exploitation of millions. Look, they say, he made it. You can too. It's the ultimate distraction. Convince people the game is fair and they'll keep playing it, no matter how rigged it is. Even in education, we praise the school that produced a Nobel laureate, but ignore the thousands of other students it failed. In business, we celebrate the CEO who turned a garage into a corporation, but erase the years of unpaid labor, inherited wealth, or insider connections that made it possible. The myth of meritocracy keeps us compliant. It convinces us that success is just a matter of trying hard enough, that if we just believe, grind, and sacrifice, will be rewarded. But meritocracy without equal opportunity is a lie, a comforting lie, and survival bias is what keeps it alive. So what does this mean for you? It means you need to stop comparing your backstage to someone else's highlight reel. It means questioning every story that makes success sound inevitable. It means remembering that for every shining star, there are galaxies of talent that never got their light. It means having compassion for others and for yourself. Because maybe you didn't fail, maybe you just didn't get lucky, and maybe that's the most honest, most human truth there is. Success isn't a mirror of your worth. It's a ghost story told by the few who made it out alive. And survival bias is the haunting silence of those who didn't. Imagine waking up, groggy, grabbing your phone, and scrolling through headlines. A fire in a distant city, a murder in a quiet suburb, a scandal rocking a political party. It feels urgent, important, like the world is unraveling and you must stay tuned just to survive it. But here's the question no one wants you to ask. Is this information, or is it bait? We like to believe that the news exists to inform us, to keep us educated, prepared, aware, but that's the illusion. That's the trick. The disturbing truth, the primary purpose of modern news isn't to inform you, it's to keep you watching. Think about the structure of most news. Breaking updates, red banners, urgent music, endless loops of the same footage, the same talking points, the same fear-stoking language. That's not information architecture. That's psychological engineering. News outlets are businesses. They don't sell facts. They sell your attention. And the more anxious, outraged, or afraid you are, the longer you stay glued to the screen. Fear boosts ratings. Outrage drives clicks. Confusion increases engagement. This isn't an accident. It's design. Notice what's rarely reported. Progress, nuance, calm resolution. Those don't sell. Those don't make you scroll. What does? Crisis, division, sensationalism. The world isn't necessarily getting worse. It's just being curated to seem that way. And this curation creates a distorted mirror. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as the algorithm wants you to see it. Think about how this affects you. Every day, you're absorbing stories that make you feel powerless, enraged, and perpetually on edge. And every time you react, comment, share, click, you're not resisting the system, you're feeding it. The media cycle isn't built for clarity, it's built for addiction. The endless scroll, the just one more video, the autoplay that pulls you deeper. These aren't tools of education, they're mechanisms of retention. The more time you spend consuming, the more ads you see, the more data they collect, the more money they make. That's the real economy of modern news, your emotional volatility converted into corporate profit. And the most insidious part, the illusion of choice. You think you're choosing what to watch. In reality, the algorithm chooses for you, learning what keeps you angry, what keeps you scared, and what keeps you watching. You're not informed, you're conditioned. Conditioned to fear your neighbor. Conditioned to distrust anyone who thinks differently. Conditioned to see the world not as a complex place full of nuance, but as a battlefield where every headline is a weapon. This is how division is monetized, how polarization becomes profitable. The news doesn't just report conflict, it manufactures it, sustains it, amplifies it. And when the dust settles, when the facts eventually emerge, when the story is corrected or clarified, it's buried. Because clarity doesn't trend. Resolution doesn't go viral. What matters is the first impression, the emotional jolt, the hot take, the rapid-fire reaction. You're not being educated, you're being primed. Primed to feel rather than think, to react rather than reflect. because reflection is slow, deliberation is boring, thoughtfulness doesn't sell ads. But here's the kicker. This system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. The goal isn't truth, it's engagement. And engagement doesn't care if you're informed. It only cares that you don't look away. So ask yourself, how much of what you believe is truly your belief, and how much has been fed to you, piece by piece, headline by headline, until it felt like your own thought? This is not a call to abandon the news. It's a call to question it, to recognize that not all information is created equal, that some truths are drowned in noise, that sometimes being informed starts with turning the volume down. Because if you don't, you risk becoming what the system wants most, a perpetual viewer, not a thinker, not a citizen. Just another pair of eyes, another captive mind. The news isn't there to serve you, it's there to survive you. And the best way to survive in a world of noise is to learn when to stop listening. Picture a fire spreading across the forest. You see the smoke in the distance. You hear the warnings, but the flames aren't at your doorstep yet. So you keep scrolling, you keep sipping your coffee. You convince yourself it's not your problem. Not yet. This is how most people live. They don't care until it hurts them. It's not because they're evil. It's because they're human. We're wired for proximity, for immediacy, for survival. If the pain isn't personal, the urgency doesn't register. A tragedy in another city, a crisis in another country. You might care for a moment. You might even post about it. But then you go back to your life, untouched, unchanged, until the fire reaches your door. There's a cruel logic to human empathy. It narrows with distance. A single tear on a friend's face can move you more than the suffering of thousands halfway across the world. The closer the pain, the sharper it cuts. And until you bleed, you often don't believe. This is why injustice thrives. Not because people are incapable of compassion, but because they wait. They wait until the system that crushed others finally turns on them, until their job is gone, until their house is underwater, until their child can't afford medicine. Then suddenly they care, then they rage. But by then, the fire has already consumed too much. You see it with poverty. When it's just statistics, it's easy to ignore, but lose your own job, struggle to pay rent, and suddenly you see it everywhere. You recognize the desperation in every grocery store aisle, every overdue bill. The empathy arrives, but late, always late. Look at politics. As long as policies hurt someone else, they're tolerable. As long as surveillance is used on others, it's justified. But the moment it touches your rights, your freedom, your voice, that's when you protest. That's when you notice. When it becomes real, this isn't just individual failure. It's a systemic one. Society teaches you to disconnect, to believe that other people's problems are none of your business. That empathy is a luxury, not a duty. You're told to focus on yourself, your goals, your grind. And so you look away, not because you lack a heart, but because the system keeps you distracted, comfortable, and just detached enough to never feel the full weight of someone else's pain. And the media, it knows this. Stories that don't affect you directly are packaged like entertainment, flashy, brief, disposable. They're designed to keep you informed enough to feel aware, but not enough to act. So the cycle repeats. People don't care until it hurts them. But when it does, when the pain becomes personal, it's often too late. The damage is done. The structure that failed someone else has now collapsed on you. And you wonder why no one warned you, why no one helped. But they did. You just weren't listening. And now you know why the world doesn't change. Because waiting until it hurts is always too late. Real change demands preemptive empathy. It demands that you care before you're forced to, that you listen when it's not your voice being silenced, that you fight when it's not your fight, because eventually it will be. The truth is brutal. The fire is always coming. If you only react when the flames touch your skin, you've already lost. So the question is, how close does the pain need to be before you finally care? And by then, what's left to save? Imagine a billionaire on stage, handing out oversized checks, cameras flashing, the crowd applauding, a donation to end hunger, a pledge for clean water, a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth. It looks noble, it feels generous. But what if it's not? What if charity isn't about helping others at all, but about preserving power? The disturbing truth is that charity often hides exploitation. It masks systemic harm with individual acts of generosity. It tells you the world is getting better, while keeping the structures that cause suffering intact. Start with this: where does the wealth come from? The same billionaires praised for their philanthropy often built their empires on underpaid labor, tax avoidance, and environmental destruction. Their profit is extracted from the very people they later help. Their generosity is funded by your struggle. And yet, when they donate a fraction of their fortune, they're celebrated. They're called heroes, saints, visionaries. The narrative shifts from critique to gratitude. You're told to be thankful. But thankful for what? For the scraps handed back after the feast. Charity becomes a public relations tool, a way to sanitize reputations, deflect criticism, and maintain control. It says, look at what I'm giving, so you don't ask. Look at what you took. But the deception runs deeper. Charity shifts the blame. Instead of holding systems accountable, it individualizes both suffering and solution. You're told poverty exists because people haven't donated enough. Not because wages are suppressed, healthcare is privatized, or housing is treated as a commodity. You're shown images of starving children, crumbling schools, and disaster-struck towns. You're moved to act, to give. But you're never encouraged to question why those conditions exist in the first place. Because if you did, you might realize something dangerous, that your empathy is being used against you, used to keep you passive, to keep you compliant, to keep you believing that the system can be fixed with kindness rather than justice. Even the non-profits themselves, many of them depend on suffering to justify their existence. The cycle of problem and solution becomes a business model. The goal isn't to end the problem, it's to manage it, sustain it, make it just visible enough to evoke donations, but never inconvenient enough to demand real change. And who decides where the money goes? Not the people affected, not the communities struggling, but boards of directors, executives, outsiders who parachute in with plans and solutions that often ignore context, culture, or history. This isn't empowerment. It's control wrapped in compassion. It's a way to maintain hierarchy while appearing benevolent. And it works because it feels good. Giving feels good. Helping feels good. And the system knows that. So you're encouraged to donate, to volunteer, to participate in charity drives. All the while, the root causes remain untouched. The machine keeps turning. Inequality deepens. And you keep believing you're making a difference. But here's the hard truth. Charity is not justice. Justice is fair wages, universal healthcare, access to education, clean air and water for everyone, not just those lucky enough to be noticed. Justice doesn't ask for donations. It demands accountability. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because charity flatters the giver, justice confronts them. So we keep choosing charity, because it's safer, easier, applauded. But every time we do, we reinforce the very structures we claim to oppose. Every time we celebrate a billionaire's donation, we ignore the exploitation that made it possible. Every time we rely on charity to fix what systems broke, we surrender power to those least willing to share it. So, what can you do? Start by asking better questions. Who benefits? Who decides? Who's missing from the table? And most importantly, what are we trying to fix, and why is it broken? Because until we confront those questions, charity will remain what it so often is, not a solution, but a symptom, a way to soothe our conscience without challenging our comfort. And the world will keep thanking the people who broke it for offering to help clean up the mess. Have you ever noticed how every system that's supposed to help you, education, healthcare, politics, justice, always seems to fall short, always inefficient, always underfunded, always in crisis? We're told these are bugs, flaws, accidents of complexity. But what if they're not? What if the dysfunction isn't a mistake, but the design? Every system is designed to stay broken. Because broken systems don't just survive, they serve someone. Let's start with education. You're told it's about learning, growth, opportunity. But why then is it structured like a factory? Why does it punish creativity, reward obedience, and churn out workers, not thinkers? Because education isn't designed to liberate. It's designed to prepare you for submission, to teach you to follow rules, not question them, to memorize, not analyze, to meet standards, not challenge them. A broken education system doesn't fail everyone. It produces exactly what the system needs: compliant, exhausted adults, trained to accept the world as it is. Now look at healthcare, supposedly a system to heal, to protect. But in practice, it's a business, a commodity. Healing becomes a service, priced and rationed. And when you're sick, you're not a person, you're a revenue stream. The longer you're dependent, the more profitable you become. Why fix a system that turns suffering into income? You don't. You let it break further. You let people fight over scraps, because desperation is easy to control. Then there's politics. The illusion of representation. You vote, you hope, you wait. But year after year, nothing truly changes, because politics isn't designed to serve you. It's a theater of promises masking a marketplace of power. Politicians answer to donors, not voters. The system rewards performance, not integrity. Loyalty, not truth. And so it remains broken, conveniently, predictably, because a broken political system keeps you blaming the other side, never the structure itself. Even justice, perhaps the most sacred illusion of all. We tell ourselves justice is blind, impartial, fair. But in reality, it sees everything: your race, your status, your wealth. It weighs them carefully before ever looking at evidence. The poor wait, the rich settle, the powerful evade. And yet, the system endures. Because justice isn't about fairness, it's about order, maintaining the appearance of accountability without ever threatening the foundations of power. You see the pattern now, don't you? Every system pretends to serve the public, but their real purpose is preservation, of hierarchy, of profit, of control. The chaos you experience isn't the result of failure. It's the product of careful design. Bureaucracy, red tape, waiting lists, underfunded schools, inaccessible medicine, political gridlock. They're not problems to be solved. They're features of a machine that only works for the few at the expense of the many. And the brilliance of it: you're trained to blame yourself. You didn't study hard enough. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't vote hard enough. It's your fault, not the system's. So you try harder, push further, burn out faster, all while the system hums along, extracting your energy, your time, your hope, without ever intending to change. Because change threatens stability, and stability is the currency of the powerful. Fixing the system means redistributing power, and those with power will never allow that willingly. So instead, they let it stay broken, broken enough to keep you chasing solutions, functional enough to maintain control. But what if you stopped believing it was an accident? What if you saw the dysfunction for what it really is, a smokescreen, a distraction, a design? Then maybe you'd stop fixing yourself to fit the system and start questioning why the system demands your brokenness to survive. Because until that question is asked and answered, the systems will remain exactly as they are. Not because they can't be fixed, but because they were never meant to be. Imagine a world where your pain is someone else's profit. Now stop imagining. That world is this one, and it always has been. Suffering isn't just tolerated. It's monetized, packaged, scaled, sold. Behind every crisis, every addiction, every moment of despair, there's a profit model humming quietly in the background. The deeper the pain, the bigger the payout. Take healthcare. You'd think its goal is healing, but look closer. Chronic illness. That's not a tragedy. It's a business plan. Pharmaceutical companies don't celebrate cures. They celebrate customers. Lifelong prescriptions, repeat procedures, treatment, not resolution, because a cured patient is a lost sale, but a suffering patient is a revenue stream. Think that's harsh? Ask yourself, why are insulin prices still skyrocketing? Why do cancer drugs cost tens of thousands? Why are mental health services rationed unless you're wealthy? Because your suffering fuels an economy, and the system is designed to keep it going. Now look at addiction. Not just to drugs, but to screens, sugar, gambling, social validation. Every click, every swipe, every anxious glance at your phone is data, is revenue. Tech companies use psychological manipulation to keep you hooked. Your dopamine spikes aren't accidents. They're engineered. You think you're the customer, you're the product. Your attention, your impulses, your compulsions, they're tracked, harvested, and monetized at scale. The more addicted you become, the more predictable you are. And the more predictable you are, the easier you are to exploit. Even tragedy becomes marketable. A school shooting, that's a media event. Watch the coverage. Count the ad breaks. Your outrage is monetized. Your grief becomes engagement. And somewhere in a meeting room, analysts track which headlines drive the most clicks. Disaster relief, big business. War, lucrative. Every time chaos erupts, someone profits from the rebuilding, the arms contracts, the reconstruction loans. Suffering isn't a side effect, it's part of the cycle. The demand never ends, so the supply never will. And while this sounds inhuman, it isn't. It's deeply human. It's how our systems were built, not around empathy, but efficiency. Not to reduce pain, but to extract value from it. Because pain creates need, and need creates dependency. And dependency, that's the gold mine. Think of debt, student loans, medical bills, credit cards. Entire industries exist to capitalize on your desperation. They don't want you to default, but they don't want you to escape either. The goal isn't solvency, it's servitude. Lifelong repayment, lifelong control. Now go deeper. Look at entertainment. How many true crime shows feed off real trauma? How many dramas glamorize poverty, violence, abuse, turning lived horror into prime-time spectacle? Even your empathy is monetized. Your tears, your curiosity, your emotional investment, sold in hour-long segments, backed by advertisers. And here's the darkest part. The more normalized it becomes, the harder it is to see. You don't notice the exploitation because it's woven into everything. You're told it's just how things work, that it's inevitable, that markets are neutral, but they aren't. They follow pain like vultures follow smoke. Because in a system that prioritizes profit above people, suffering is not a bug, it's the business model. So the next time you see suffering, ask not who's helping, but who's cashing in. Because until we recognize how deeply pain has been commodified, we will never understand why the world resists healing. And the truth is brutal. Your pain may be personal, but to them it's just product. Power doesn't exist to serve you. It doesn't exist to protect the weak, uplift the just, or ensure fairness. That's the illusion. That's the myth. They feed you to keep you obedient, to keep you quiet, to keep you believing that justice is just a matter of time. But here's the disturbing truth. Power protects itself first. Always, before it protects you, before it protects truth, before it protects morality. Power's first instinct is survival. It doesn't matter if that power wears a uniform, a robe, a badge, or a suit. It doesn't matter if it speaks in the name of democracy, religion, science, or law. The moment power is threatened, it circles the wagons, it erases evidence, it silences dissent. It rewrites the narrative to cast itself as the hero and everyone else as a threat. This isn't new. This isn't rare. This is how power works. Look at history. Scandals don't break because institutions expose themselves. They break because someone leaks the truth, and even then, only if the public outrage is too loud to ignore. The default setting is concealment. The instinct is always protection. Police departments cover for officers who abuse their authority. Religious organizations shield abusers to preserve reputation. Corporations bury safety violations to protect profits. Governments classify documents, suppress protests, imprison whistleblowers, all to protect themselves from the truth. You think the system will protect you because you've done nothing wrong. But that's not how power thinks. To power, wrong and right are irrelevant. What matters is threat. What matters is control. If you threaten the image, the profit, the authority, it will come for you, regardless of your innocence. And it will justify it after the fact. Power doesn't play by the rules, it writes them. And when it breaks them, it simply rewrites the narrative. Mistakes were made. Policy changes are being considered. A few sacrificial scapegoats, maybe never the core, never the structure. The system pretends to reform while ensuring it remains untouched at its foundation. Because if real change happened, if real accountability was enforced, power would have to face itself, and it won't. It never has. Instead, it adapts, rebrands, updates its language, makes performative gestures, apologizes publicly while doubling down privately, all to maintain the illusion that it cares, that it's listening, that it's just. But watch closely. In every moment of crisis, ask one question: who is power protecting right now? And you'll see the pattern, you'll see the cover-ups, the gaslighting, the distraction tactics. The focus shifts from the harm done to the potential embarrassment of being caught. The institution doesn't grieve the damage. It fears the damage to its image. Power wants you compliant, not empowered. It wants your faith, your labor, your silence. It teaches you that change happens through the proper channels, that rebellion is dangerous, that authority knows best. It molds your perception so thoroughly that even when you see the cracks, you hesitate to question it, because questioning power feels unsafe. And that fear, that hesitation, that's by design. Power doesn't maintain itself with force alone. It survives through belief, through trust, through the hope that it will protect you, even when it never has, even when it never will. And if you ever threaten that trust by exposing corruption, demanding justice, organizing resistance, power will turn on you. It won't matter how polite, how lawful, how reasonable you are. The moment you become inconvenient, you become expendable. This is not a glitch in the system. It is the system. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. And what it reveals is a simple, brutal truth. It will burn the world down before it gives itself up, because power never protects you. It protects itself. First, always. Rules are meant to maintain order, or so we're told. But order for whom? And at whose expense? From the moment you're born, rules define your world. What time to sleep, what clothes to wear, what words you can say. You're taught that rules are the glue that holds society together, that without them there would be chaos. But here's the question nobody asks. Who makes the rules, and who do they truly serve? Rules don't float above us like divine commandments. They're crafted, designed, enforced by people, by institutions, by systems with power. Then more often than not, they serve the people who already have that power. Look at history. Rules once said women couldn't vote, that segregation was acceptable, that only the landowning elite deserved representation. Those weren't accidental missteps. They were deliberate architectures of control. Rules, when weaponized, become elegant cages, beautifully justified, logically airtight, and devastatingly effective at keeping people in their place. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: rules aren't made for the powerful. They're made to restrain the powerless. The powerful don't live under the same rules. They live above them. If you have enough money, enough influence, you can bend the rules, twist them, rewrite them entirely. You can break the law and walk free. You can commit atrocities and call it policy. You can rig systems and call it business. Then the most disturbing part: it's all legal, because the rules were written to make it so. Meanwhile, the powerless are smothered by those same rules. If they step out of line, even slightly, the consequences are immediate and unforgiving. Minor infractions become life-altering punishments. Late fees turn into eviction notices. Petty theft becomes incarceration. Disobedience becomes criminality. Think about school. From an early age, rules are used to mold behavior. Sit still, raise your hand, don't question. But what if you're neurodivergent? What if you process the world differently? Then the rules don't protect you. They punish you. You're labeled difficult, disruptive, a problem to be solved, or consider protest. When the powerful want change, they lobby, legislate, manipulate from within. But when the powerless seek change, they march, they yell, they resist, and suddenly the rules shift. Protest becomes riot. Dissent becomes terrorism. The same act, challenging the system, is judged not by its content, but by who commits it. Even morality is subject to these rules. The powerful justify cruelty as policy. The powerless are judged immoral for fighting back. A rich man exploiting thousands is praised as a titan of industry. A poor man stealing bread is condemned as a criminal. Same society, different standards, because the rules were never about fairness. They were about control. Now, some will say rules are necessary, that without them society would collapse. But that's a false choice. The alternative to unjust rules isn't chaos. It's justice. It's creating systems that protect everyone equally, not just those who already hold the keys. But that requires questioning the rules. Not just the obvious ones, but the silent ones. The ones etched into culture, tradition, expectation. The ones that tell you to be polite when you should be angry, to be patient when you should be loud, to accept your place instead of demanding a better one. Because rules are more than laws, they're norms, scripts, psychological boundaries. They shape what you believe is possible. And the most effective rules are the ones you don't even notice, the ones you follow automatically, without resistance. Ask yourself how many of your choices are truly your own, and how many are the result of rules you've internalized, never questioned, never even seen. There's a reason revolutions begin not with violence, but with awareness, with someone saying, "Why do we follow this rule?" That question is dangerous. It's destabilizing, but it's also liberating, because once you see the rules for what they are, you can begin to reclaim your autonomy, and that's what the powerful fear most, not disobedience, but awakening. The moment the powerless realize they were never truly protected by the rules, only contained by them, the entire illusion begins to crack. So next time someone tells you to follow the rules, ask yourself who benefits from your obedience, and what would it cost you to break free? Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is simply stop playing by the rules. You're not just part of a system, you're replaceable in it. That's the point. From the first day you stepped into a classroom, into a job, into society, you were quietly being taught a terrifying lesson that your value is conditional. Conditional on performance, on compliance, on your ability to fit a mold that wasn't designed with you in mind. And if you step out of line, if you slow down, burn out, speak up, or simply want more, you'll find out how quickly you can be swapped for someone else. You're not special here, you're useful. And when you stop being useful, you disappear. Imagine a machine, massive, cold, unstoppable. Every day, people step inside, hoping to become part of something meaningful. But what they really become are cogs, interchangeable, measured not by who they are, but by what they produce. How many emails you send, how many hours you work, how few questions you ask. The machine doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about your output. If you break, it won't pause. It will replace you. And worse, it will convince you that being replaced is your fault. Think about how careers work. There's always someone younger, hungrier, cheaper, faster. Someone trained to believe they're not just better, but more obedient. So you compete. You overwork. You self-sacrifice. Not because you want to, but because you're terrified of being left behind. You feel the pressure to be irreplaceable in a system that was designed to make no one irreplaceable. Even at your best, the threat hangs over you. Subtle, persistent. You're promoted, praised, positioned like you matter until you cost too much. Until your loyalty outgrows your usefulness. Then suddenly, you're no longer seen. You're no longer needed. And just like that, you're gone. The system's brilliance is in making you feel like it's your responsibility to stay essential, like it's your job to keep proving your worth. So you take on more, you stay later, you smile harder, you ignore your body, your mind, your boundaries. Because in the back of your mind, there's always someone waiting to take your place. And that fear, that's how control works. This isn't limited to the workplace. It's in education, relationships, even activism. The moment you stop serving the narrative, you're sidelined. In school, you were told that grades would save you, that if you were smart enough, dedicated enough, you'd be different. But the system doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards conformity. You weren't learning to think. You were learning to obey. In relationships, too, you're taught that love must be earned, that your worth depends on what you offer, your time, your body, your silence. You learn to suppress your needs, to become convenient, adaptable, because you've internalized the message. Love, like labor, is conditional. Withdraw the service, lose the place. Even in movements for change, there's an unspoken hierarchy. If you become inconvenient to the cause, too radical, too honest, you're out. Replaceable, even in rebellion. Because every structure, even the ones claiming to liberate you, inherits the logic of the system it was born in. But here's the cruelest twist. You start to believe it. You begin to see yourself the way the system does. Not as a person, but as a role, a function, a label. You start to fear rest, fear silence, fear being invisible, because you've been trained to equate stillness with failure. So you never stop. You keep performing, producing, pretending. You lose yourself in the effort to stay relevant. And when you finally collapse, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, there's no reward, no safety net, just the next person ready to take your place. That's the quiet violence of a system built on disposability. But you're not actually replaceable. Not in the way they want you to believe. You are not a function. You are not a product. You are not a role to be filled and discarded. That's the illusion, the lie. The truth is that your value isn't in your output, it's in your existence, in your uniqueness, in your resistance to being flattened into something generic. And that's what threatens the system most. Not rebellion, not revolution, but the refusal to be reduced. Because once you stop believing you're replaceable, you stop playing the game, you stop competing, you stop exhausting yourself trying to earn a place in a structure that was never built for you. And in that moment, you become dangerous, not because you're fighting the system, but because you no longer need it to define you. You're meant to feel replaceable, so you'll behave, so you'll comply, so you'll exhaust yourself trying to stay essential. But the moment you realize you never needed their permission to matter, that's when you finally become free. You're standing in a crowded room. People everywhere, laughing, talking, scrolling on their phones. At the center of the room, someone collapses, a slow, trembling fall to the floor. You notice. A few others glance over, but no one moves. No one helps, and neither do you. Not because you're cruel, not because you don't care, but because no one else is moving. And that's enough to keep you still. Welcome to the chilling truth about human behavior. People will watch you suffer if suffering becomes normal. Normalization. What does it mean for something to be normal? It doesn't mean it's right or just or fair. It means it's accepted. Routine, expected. Something the crowd no longer questions. When suffering becomes a background noise, when it's woven into the everyday fabric of life, it disappears. People don't ignore it consciously, they just stop seeing it altogether. Think of homelessness. You walk past tents, bodies huddled in corners, faces weathered by the wind. At first, it stings. It feels wrong, but day after day, the sting fades. Not because the suffering ends, but because you've adapted. You've accepted that this is how the world works. And so, like the others, you keep walking. The bystander effect, psychologists have a name for this phenomenon. The bystander effect. The more people who witness a crisis, the less likely any one person is to act. Responsibility diffuses. Action becomes someone else's job. But it's more than psychology. It's training. You're conditioned to wait for cues from others, to mirror what the group does. If no one moves, you don't move. If everyone accepts the suffering, so do you. Silence becomes safety. Inaction becomes the default. The power of repetition. And here's the trick. Normalization isn't created through logic. It's created through repetition. Show people something often enough, pain, cruelty, injustice, and it becomes background, not invisible, exactly, but accepted, expected. Think of war on the news. Think of mass shootings. Think of entire systems of exploitation. You see them, you know they're wrong, but they keep happening, again and again, until your outrage dulls, your voice fades, and you stop expecting change. What once horrified you now barely registers. Social proof humans are social creatures. You don't just look to others for cues, you rely on them to define reality itself. If everyone around you seems okay with what's happening, you assume it must be okay. If no one else is panicking, why should you? If everyone else is stepping over the suffering, why should you be the one to stop? Social proof doesn't just shape your behavior, it shapes your morality. You come to believe what the group believes. You value what the group values, and you ignore what the group ignores. Because being different, being the one who notices, who speaks, who acts, is dangerous. It threatens your place in the tribe. And somewhere deep in your mind, belonging still means survival. The system is built on this. This isn't just a quirk of psychology, it's a feature of the system. The world works better for those in power when you become numb, when injustice becomes normal. The powerful are free to maintain it. When exploitation becomes expected, the exploited stop fighting back, and so suffering is hidden in plain sight. It's dressed in routine, masked by bureaucracy, buried in headlines. You're shown just enough to get used to it, but never enough to feel empowered to change it. You're told it's complicated. You're told it's someone else's problem. You're told to be calm, patient, rational. You're told that outrage is unhelpful. You're taught to watch, but not to intervene. Historical echoes history is full of these moments. Genocides, famines, systemic oppression. They didn't happen in secret. People saw, people knew, but they had learned not to see, not to care, not to act. Because by then, the horror had already become the norm. And once something becomes the norm, the conscience collapses under the weight of collective silence. And so suffering becomes scenery, a backdrop to daily life, a footnote to the main event, the moral cost. But here's the price you pay. Every time you look away, it becomes easier to look away next time. Every time you justify inaction, you lose a piece of your ability to act. Your morality erodes, not through evil choices, but through endless tiny surrenders, until one day you no longer recognize the moment when you stopped being someone who would have helped. And that's the most terrifying part. Not that people will watch you suffer, but that they'll do so thinking they're good, thinking they care, thinking they're helpless. When in truth, they've simply been trained to believe that suffering is normal and therefore unchangeable. But it's not. And that truth, if you let it in, is as powerful as it is uncomfortable.